Welcome. We will now start the third session of talks of the Aveiro Tech Week, which is dedicated to the theme Smart and Resilient Cities. Please welcome on stage and online the speakers and our moderator. For the opening speech, please welcome the City Councillor João Machado.
Muito boa tarde a todos. Antes de mais, pedir desculpa por este ligeiro atraso e dar as boas-vindas a esta sessão do Aveiro Tech Week. Era para ser o Sr. Presidente a estar aqui a abrir a sessão, mas por motivos profissionais não pode estar, a ver se ainda consegue vir a fazer o encerramento da sessão e, como a mim, então, fazer a abertura desta palestra. Falar de cidades inteligentes. Falar de cidades inteligentes é falar de Aveiro Tech City. Aveiro Tech City foi apresentado ano passado e temos vindo a trabalhar muito arduamente para que Aveiro Tech City comece a mostrar os seus primeiros resultados. Resultados esses que nesta semana alguns começam a estar e estão disponíveis para todos os nossos munícipes poderem usufruir e perceber como é que a tecnologia irá afetar positivamente o seu futuro. Falar da Aveiro Tech City é falar do que vamos aprovar, por exemplo, em reunião de Câmara da manhã. Amanhã, na reunião de Câmara, vamos aprovar o nosso Aveiro Tech City Living Lab. Estamos a falar de 16 km de fibra óptica instalada na zona urbana da cidade para testar, para as empresas virem testar novos produtos. Estamos a falar de termos 9 microestações meteorológicas no centro da cidade para nos ajudar e apoiar na monitorização do ambiente em Aveiro, que é uma das grandes dificuldades, nós por vezes conseguimos medir e, portanto, também estamos a instalar estas 9 microestações. Estamos a falar de ter 5G, um testbed de 5G, onde, se forem já ao centro da cidade hoje, veem empresas a tirarem proveito desse mesmo 5G e, portanto, conseguem também perceber com os use cases que temos do que é que isso irá afetar. E, portanto, falar de Aveiro Tech City é também foi uma forma e uma ferramenta que tivemos para dar resposta à Covid-19. Foi uma surpresa para todos, não é? Foi uma correria, o inesperado, não sabíamos o que é que o dia seguinte, ou a hora seguinte, nos iria proporcionar e, portanto, foi tudo assim uma loucura para todos, mas conseguimos dar resposta e, claramente, a tecnologia foi também parte da solução para nos ajudar a todos. Não só para comunicar nas redes sociais, todo o envolvimento, todas as condições que nós tivemos que implementar, tivemos que mudar os horários de funcionamento da Câmara Municipal, mas funcionámos sempre. Tivemos que alterar uma série os nossos mercados municipais continuaram abertos, mas cheios de novas restrições, mas ao mesmo tempo criámos novos serviços, como o serviço takeaway, que ainda hoje se mantém. É uma curiosidade, nunca tínhamos testado isto nos nossos mercados municipais. A Covid-19 foi o motivo para nós acionarmos e hoje continuamos, apesar de haver a comunidade deslocar-se mais facilmente ao mercado, continuamos a prestar esse serviço e, portanto, foram desafios e vários desafios que se foram colocando a nós todos e que a tecnologia claramente foi uma ajuda. E, portanto, hoje temos uma versão de Milão, uma versão de Viena, do que é que também está a ser para eles esta situação do Covid e como é que estas cidades inteligentes e resilientes estão a dar resposta, como é que isto também irá afetar o futuro. E depois temos aqui em palco 2 professores do ISCTE, a professora Alexandra e o professor Manuel Santos, aos quais agradeço também a vossa presença e que vão também passar a sua perspectiva. E depois temos um magnífico Pro-Reitor, Filipe Teles, para nos servir aqui de moderador, ao qual também agradeço a sua presença e por mais uma vez ter aceito o desafio que lhe colocamos. A todos, resta-me desejar uma boa sessão e usufruam desta Aveiro Tech Week. Temos aqui muito para aproveitar e muito para mostrar. E, portanto, esta é só uma semana que agrega todo o trabalho que temos andado a fazer ao longo do ano e que vai influenciar claramente os próximos meses e anos do município de Aveiro. Obrigado e boa sessão.
Well, we'll change now to English, as it was explained before, beforehand, I hope. Dear City Councillor, dear guests, dear members of the panel, I'm expected just to present some general overview of what we are expected to do today, some technical issues also, and just a brief explanation of the discussion I would like to foster during this afternoon. First of all, for those following us online I think you have the availability of all 2 different links, one with translation from English to Portuguese and a different link in English. So an online link. You can find it in the Tech Week webpage, so this is just a technical explanation. We will have, I hope, and I'm sure, an interesting discussion following 4 different perspectives of how cities can be more resilient in addressing these urgent challenges of COVID-19, as well as the issues usually related to the role of citizens in this process, and also what smart cities are, and if there's any relation with the things we are living today. For that, we'll have 2 guests that will present their perspectives online. So we'll start with Ina Homeier from she's the head of Smart City Vienna in Austria. Lucia Scopelliti from the Economic Planning Unit of the city of Milan. And then with us already presented, Alexandra Paio, she's a professor at ISCTE in Lisbon, and Manuel Santos, my colleague from the University of Aveiro. He was and still is responsible for the testing laboratory, COVID-19 laboratory, working closely with the health authorities, and we'll also share some of our own experiences in this city and our university regarding the challenges of fighting or tackling with issues related to COVID-19. Let me just briefly give you a very simple perspective of a more, I would say, I was talking with Alexandra before, more optimistic perspective. I would like to advocate, and let's see how the discussion will go, that COVID-19 pandemic can be a very interesting catalyst, a catalyst of change. And what we just heard from the city councillor, João Machado, regarding how some very swift, fast, interesting changes were introduced in simple things like how markets work, how urban transportation had to adapt, how our city bureaucracy had to change and adapt. Usually we, in the academia working in this urban policy fields, we are always hoping for change, and we also know that change occurs very slowly. There's a kind of a gap, important gap between the optimism of those advocating for change and the usual difficulties that institutions have in adapting to that change and the need to change. But what we have seen during this period we are living today is that institutions can change and adapt rather quickly. Citizens are called to help and interact with city authorities in producing change. New civic engagement alternatives are in place. New answers from the public policy side are also in place. So there's an opportunity to introduce change, even though this might seem a very optimistic perspective. I would also say, to balance this, that the question is, we know also that people want to go back to what we call now the usual normal. And will this usual normal, the things as they were before, mean also that we will forget this capacity to adapt and change? Will our urban policy in Portugal, Aveiro, Lisbon, Milan and Vienna will go back to the same as usual? Well, that's something we may expect, but the discussion today is precisely to understand how cities adapt, how this change is possible, and how we can make sure that we can endure this rapid step of change. So I will not speak anymore, because now the floor is to our guests, and I'll give immediately the floor to our first guest in Vienna. I must just explain that our guest, Ina, will have to leave immediately after her presentation. Eventually, if we have time just for one question, I'll do it, and then we'll go with the rest of the program as expected. Thank you very much.
Can you show the first slide, please? Ok. Boa tarde. O meu nome é Ina Homeier, sou arquitecta e estou a trabalhar para a cidade de Viena. Eu falo mais ou menos português, mas vou fazer a minha apresentação em inglês porque English is much better. When I prepared this presentation, I was hoping that I could speak or reflect on our past experiences, but unfortunately, the situation is got worse in Austria, especially in Vienna, and what I heard in Portugal as well. So unfortunately, it's quite actual situation. I'm talking again. My focus will be on the COVID-19 situation and how we dealt in Vienna with this crisis management. Next slide, please. Next one. Thanks. The consequences of COVID-19 affected all areas of life in a more dramatic way than almost any other crisis in the recent past. Due to the serious health consequences and pandemic threat, above average rapid and drastic action was required. Urban planning and development as a discipline with a long-term time horizon of several years to decades presented this as an unusual task. The number of crises and crisis trends has been increasing for some time. Accordingly, the interest of planning disciplines in dealing with emergencies, crises, and catastrophes and timely response options is growing and making more pressure on us. Nevertheless, urban planning and development is its core competence and to continue to pursue long-term and forward-looking strategies in the future. The starting point here for me is the question of the importance of long-term strategic approaches and the continuous development of a robust, clean urban development in times of acute crisis. The relationship between tactical ad hoc solutions and long-term strategies is also addressed. Next slide, please. Thanks. Rapid changes with unforeseeable consequences require robustness and adaptability of the urban system. It is the task of urban planning to ensure this openness of the city to change while at the same time securing a sustainable development path based on stable values. The accumulation of crisis-like developments has become the defining feature of our time. I think you're too fast now. Nevertheless, the lockdown declared almost worldwide in mid-March 2022 by the global spread of the COVID-19 represented a break of unique proportions. Urban development and urban planning are also facing challenges, the weight of which was clearly demonstrated by the shock of the pandemic. It is essential for urban planning and development not to necessarily view every crisis as a turning point, but to weigh up long-term effects and development scenarios. Especially in times of increased vulnerability to crisis, we must remember that every crisis is different, and that different crises sometimes even place contradictory demands on the city system. The solutions can therefore only be to push ahead with measures and strategies that prove their worth in as many problem situations as possible and are highly robust. In the acute management of the pandemic, it has been observed that in uncertain times, the priority of long-term development concepts recedes into the background, while the urgency of other measures increases. However, it is important not to lose sight of the fact that long-term strategies are the conditions for well-founded short-term measures. Next slide, please. The overall objective of Smart City Wien framework strategy is the best quality of life for all inhabitants of Vienna, while minimizing the consumption of resources. This will be realized through comprehensive innovation. These three components, quality of life, resource preservation, and innovation, are also mirrored in the Smart City Wien logo and represent its three working dimensions. To specify this meta-vision, the Smart City Wien dimension, a total of 65 specific objectives were defined in the Smart City Wien strategy. There were qualitative and quantitative objectives. The time frame of the objectives is until 2050, but many objectives incorporate realization until 2030s. But goals do not lose significance in the times of COVID-19. Next slide, please. Many observations on COVID-19 can be described using the mobility sector as an example. On the one hand, mobility planning is designed for long-term developments and has a far-reaching influence in all areas of public life. On the other hand, it was precisely the mobility sector in which tactical ad hoc measures were taken in many places, such as the use of so-called pop-up bike lanes or changes in the frequency of public transport. The city of Vienna relies heavily on attractive public transport. There's a steady increase in the number of users, but during the pandemic observation period, however, an 80% reduction in the number of public transport passengers was observed. The situation, however, was comparable to that in other European cities. To stop the expansion of public transport due to a short-term decline in passenger numbers would be very counterproductive in the long term. The continuous expansion of environmentally friendly local transport is a decisive factor in the transformation of cities towards a climate-sensitive future. Examples such as our so-called pop-up cycle path underline the fact that it is mainly small-scale projects to adapt traffic organization that have been implemented to cope with the crisis. They are to be seen as part of well-planned short-term measures that were only made possible by long-term strategies. In any case, in the sense of a psychology of the pop-up city, they support positive experience of change. Next slide, please. In the debate on the distribution of public space, COVID-19 has created a worldwide dynamic which confirms the direction of Vienna's existing strategic approaches. The demand for public space to walk and linger in was also strongly heard in Vienna. Moments of crisis such as COVID-19 underline Vienna's existing strategic approaches to make public space more flexible and to move away from monofunctional ideas of modernity. These strategies allow Vienna's spatial potential to meet the needs of all people in the city. Ad hoc measures such as temporary meeting zones have revealed the potential of open spaces in the dense city. Such ad hoc measures can learn from long-term planned projects such as the cool streets. They create places to stay outdoors, to play and cool down in the neighborhood. They provide additional seating and make use of the available space by banning cars from driving, stopping and parking. Such short-term and permanent measures are flanked by long-term research projects of the Vienna Urban Planning Department on the subject of placemaking, tactical urbanism or superblocks. Next one, please. In addition to the sometimes dramatic health consequences for those affected by the disease, far-reaching crisis tendencies for the economy are already apparent. These involve budgetary changes, the consequences of which will be felt for a long time to come. The state of emergency and the associated need for economic support represent an opportunity to strategically shape the necessary and challenging system change. Otherwise, there's a danger of a double investment constraint. For the confrontation with the effects of climate change is inevitable. For this reason, investments should always have a climate-relevant component. This demand is an integral part of Vienna's urban planning and is supported by the Austrian Institute of Economic Research, for example. State economic aid can not only provide urgently needed rescue measures, but also have long-term effects. It is therefore far-sighted and sensible to bring the financial aid into line with Vienna's agreed objectives to combat the global climate crisis. It would be disastrous if COVID-19 ignored, disregarded, or even undermined the fight against the climate crisis. It is therefore essential to ensure that every economic investment provides climate-relevant impulses in action, in addition to the social absorptive measures. The current situation and the released economic incentives should be used to achieve the goals of the Paris Climate Convention and the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Next one, please. So, for urban planning and urban development, two main directions for a longer-term learning process are essential. Firstly, learning from ad hoc measures for long-term strategies. And secondly, the importance of long-term strategies as a precondition for ad hoc measures. The motto must be that if planning has to act in the short term, it should not depart from its long-term objectives. Although it became visible during the observation period that Vienna's objectives for the future also remained valid in terms of permanent change, and that the long-term strategies of the city of Vienna proved to be relatively stable during the crisis, the city's long-term strategies have not been able to achieve their objectives in the past. Nevertheless, at the same time, a continuous examination of the strategies and guidelines is needed in order to adapt them so that they can contribute to a robust city in a long term. The question therefore arises as to what it means for a discipline with long-term planning horizons to have a denser rhythm of changes. Due to accumulation of crisis tendencies, urban development has to deal with the long-term establishment of robustness and short-term tactical reaction speed. Emerging problems such as COVID-19 can provide a rare opportunity for urban planning to test short-term adaptations in the field of urban development in the sense of a pop-up city. Perhaps the pop-up city and tactical urbanism offer a valuable way to test long-term developments and sound out robust urban structures. After all, not only acute cutbacks such as COVID-19, but also long-term threat scenarios such as the climate catastrophe and advancing digitalization are confronting planning with ever new and faster moving challenges and problems to which planning should already respond with robust answers today. So, obrigada, and I hope that I could give some input for the discussion and for the following speakers.
Very temporary experiments and changes and rapid change at the urban landscape, and this difficult balance between long-term strategies and commitments of a city with the need to rapidly change the practice of day-to-day lives and the pop-up initiatives. It's one of the difficult balances urban planning has to face and urban policy has to face, and I think probably in the end we'll also address this with some comments from Alexandra. But I think we can move on and leave the questions for the end. And I would like to give the floor to Lucia from the city of Milan. I think she's already online with us, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
I'm sorry, yes, physically in Aveiro. I've been in Aveiro and I really loved the city, but I'm going to talk about the strategy in Milan in order to face and overcome the lockdown phase, and hopefully also this second wave, which is really tough for Europe, and not just Europe. I work for the municipality of Milan in the economic planning unit. I'm head of unit and work in the department for urban economy and labor. The first slide, please. In 2019, Milano was on the rise. Milano is well known for fashion, design, culture, cutting-edge architecture. It is also the economic engine of Italy. But our citizens and our administration have always had bigger aspirations based on a vision focused on three priorities: sustainability, communities, and technology. As the pandemic brought daily life to a halt, Milano responded in real time, fast-tracking important projects and leapfrogging others. But we never lost the focus on these three drivers, so environmental sustainability, social innovation, and digital transformation again. The city of Milano remained committed to innovation and to its goals for a sustainable and equitable future before, during, and coming out of the crisis. And during, as I was saying, this second wave, of course. Next slide, please. So the first driver is about sustainability. So for years, Milano has been working to be a fully sustainable and resilient city to mitigate the threats of climate change. In 2019, the municipality set a series of clear targets in order to speed up the transition to a circular economy. By 2030, for example, we plan to plant 3 million trees across the metropolitan area, reduce carbon emission by 45%, lower the city's temperature by 2 degrees Celsius, and also in recognition of its circular economy program, Milano was invited to join the Circular Economy 100 network operated by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Next, please. And then community. In this journey, we are co-creating city-led initiatives with communities. We transformed our public spaces based on the principle of tactical urbanism. Also, the colleague from Vienna mentioned tactical urbanism as a means of transforming cities, involving local communities in the restyling of their neighborhood through easy-to-implement, scalable, and special interventions. For example, through the Open Plazas project, we created public spaces in residential areas that previously lacked them, improving safety. And we also strengthened our public engagement strategies to ensure Milanese have a strong voice in the changes that are made to their city. A bold example of our new master plan, our new city master plan, it's a document that was co-created with citizens that answers more than 1,500 questions and present 840 freshly new ideas. So we are gathering and sharing best practice also with our colleagues in Italy and abroad by actively participating in the most important European and global cities networks, such as the Global Resilient Cities Network that emerges from the 100 Resilient Cities program. Next, please. Third, technology. So technology, of course, is a crucial lever to empower our residents, Therefore, in 2016, we launched a digital transformation plan that was focused on 4 pillars: infrastructure, services for the technology component, digital education and digital skills for the cultural component. We prioritized the rollout of digital services, making them more accessible and easier to use. We adopted a mobile-first strategy, and our motto was mobile first, one click. The result was the Digital Citizen Folder, a single point of access to certificates and e-government services. More than 65% of certificates in 2019 were issued digitally, saving time, cost, and reducing also our carbon footprint. This was made possible by the deployment of a huge interoperability plan that standardized and synchronized all our data, ensuring it was connected, usable, and scalable for further needs. To be sure our technology was inclusive, we launched a public-private program for digital education, offering in-class and virtual training to citizens. Next, please. Indeed, our achievement lies not just in the principle we chose, but in our innovation process and culture. Public engagement is a fundamental part of our culture. We support and partner with community members to identify challenges and co-design creative solutions. We partner with businesses and forge public-private partnerships, and we created the condition for the birth of more than 2,100 innovative startups here in Milan. We see the Milano City Hall as a facilitator that creates opportunity for both citizens and business. For our citizens, we create education opportunities. So, for example, a program called STEM in the City trains 15,000 youth, mainly girls, in STEM and opens their eyes to careers in the tech field. For our entrepreneurs, we developed a social innovation incubator called Fabric and many civic crowdfunding initiatives. And for our businesses, we co-launch large infrastructure initiatives such as the 5G testbed project, so that companies can test possible use cases that may one day benefit our city and Europe. Milano was also acknowledged as a global testbed for urban green innovation by C40, Reinventing Cities Global Competition, in which the city had 7 winning submissions, and among them there is a project called L'Innesto, which will be the first carbon-neutral social housing project in Italy, demonstrating that cities can simultaneously advance environmental and social impact goals. Next, please. In February 2020, the COVID-19 crisis struck. And I say crisis because it quickly evolved into our nation's biggest crisis since the Second World War. We were the first, as you may know, large European city to be hit. We were shocked, not prepared, nobody was. For 70 days, 10 million people and over 100,000 businesses in Milano and the surrounding Lombardy region were placed in lockdown. The most vibrant city in Italy became deserted. And this was the picture last spring. Next, please. The virus was faster than our bureaucracy, and we had to act quickly, leveraging all the tools at our disposal. The assets we developed before the pandemic were the engine of our response. So our digital foundations enabled us to operate across departments. We collaborated in the EU task forces, such as the Global Mayor COVID-19 Recovery Task Force. We had a strong culture of collaboration with the private and the academic sector. We had organized information streams and sources to make real-time, data-driven decisions with a program run together with the Polytechnic of Milano called Unlock. Next, please. We tried to shift from shock to action, but we knew we weren't able to respond to this challenge alone. So we assembled a strategy to engage other stakeholders. We developed a digital ecosystem to map analyze, cooperate with third parties, and intervene in emergency-related matters. We called it Milano Aiuta, Milano Helps. It managed more than 40,000 citizens' requests. We couldn't have faced the pandemic without the dedication of our frontline workers, volunteers, companies. We delivered weekly food to 6,400 families in need and 2.7 million pieces of personal protective equipment. Next, please. Even during the lockdown, life must go on and the services need to be available for citizens. So we kept our offices open for critical services, but the majority of our citizens adopted for digital services. So since March 9th, all services to citizens have been granted digitally, with the sole exception of the celebration of weddings and civil unions suspended as per decree. The adoption rate of digital certificates peaked at 85% and has been stable since then. This picture shows the first wedding we celebrated in Milan right after the lockdown. Thanks to our digital services, this couple was able to fast-track the procedure and get the pre-wedding certificates online. Next, please. So, as Filipe Teles was introducing, the COVID-19 pandemic provided us also an opportunity to change course. So instead of returning to normal, we launched Milano 2020, a strategic plan to reopen the city and fast-track our goals. Milano 2020 was an open document that all citizens can contribute to. We received almost 3,000 proposals from our citizens. These ideas included the launch of the Strade Aperte, Open Street, a scheme to reduce car use and reallocate street space to cycling and walking to facilitate social distancing measures, including the introduction of more than 35 kilometers of new bike lane. We adapted our public spaces to ensure businesses could reopen safely and granted almost 2,200 open space concessions for free. We also launched a call for designers in order to submit architectural projects to be adopted by retailers in order to change the structure and architecture of their shops. The new bike lanes are now completed and open space occupation is still free of charge. We also defined an intervention plan in collaboration with trade unions and with the national regional services and started a job reintegration plan. We consolidated home office as an ordinary system of work performance. We monitored the return to work of women in agreement with trade unions in order to avoid and contrast the loss of female employment in the post-lockdown phase. And finally, we facilitated the adoption of extraordinary safety and screening sanitization PPEs plan in coordination with our health authorities. Next, please. So now we look forward, confirming and expanding the incoming and outgoing flexibility measures in order to decongest mobility and encourage the reconciliation of life and work times. We are working in order to prolong the opening of services to the public, and we are negotiating with our public transport company new conditions for the next 3 months. In general, we stay committed to our principles and committed to our approach to innovation. We believe that the pandemic proved once again that people are the real engine of innovation and that a restart should not be built keeping in mind our previous organizational and evolutionary models. Mario Draghi, ex-European Central Bank, recently spoke of the reform of European rules based on ethics and cohesion. Mariana Mazzucato, a very famous public economist at UCL, she gave several interviews during the lockdown talking about the importance of public purpose in PPPs, and there is also a lot of talk about the role of the so-called fourth sector, purpose-first economics and impact finance. Next, please. We are now putting all measures possible and tolerable in order to avoid a new lockdown. You all know the situation in Europe and abroad is critical again. We are better equipped now, and we think we can cope far better with issues that last spring were very, very tough. We have recently submitted to the national government a proposal for the local use of the recovery fund destined to Italy, always keeping in mind an anticipatory approach and a vision inspired to the certainty that a simple and bold reconstruction is not expected, but a reconstruction on new foundation will be definitely necessary. Thank you.
Works right now, and if Lucia, can you hear me? Maybe later during the Q&A, I hope, because we have some questions for Lucia also. I'm having some feedback now. Okay, thanks. Again, now you're getting the feedback. That's interesting. Okay. Almost so. Yeah, perfect. As I was saying, this is again a very engaging presentation that puts together two of the most pressing issues regarding urban policy today, which are how to cope with these long-term strategies, like the Milan case. They were looking for and working on sustainability, communities, and technology, and at the same time having to answer to very pressing and demanding issues like fighting and dealing with COVID-19 impacts in their own city. And one of the usual questions is, or usual nowadays, for the last 6 months, I would say, is it possible to keep the long-term strategy while at the same time giving the floor for these very quick changes? Or even from the optimistic perspective, these needed changes may have actually a positive influence in the strategies, as the examples from Vienna we just heard before were focusing on, like the soft mobility changes and the pop-up placemaking examples, which were actually working towards the sustainability agenda of the city of Vienna, or the technology answer from Milan, which was only possible as a fast answer to the problem because they were engaged in this technology and innovation agenda since at least 2016 as a main priority. This means that there are positive effects, but also some relevant questions regarding the how to manage the long-term agendas and policies that we will, during the debate, I hope, have time to discuss. But moving from this city management perspective and city policy perspective to another aspect, relevant aspect to how the cities have been answering to the challenges of COVID, is the role of universities also, and what some universities can do, especially in some areas, related to their role in this process. And that's why I'm inviting Manuel Santos to have the floor and to present what we have been doing during the recent months regarding this aspect. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. And just before I start, I would like to thank the City Council and our mayor for the invitation to be here, talking a little bit about what we are doing at the university to help the region and the city with this pandemic. So regarding the pandemic, this is the world yesterday. Almost 40 million cases of infection and about 1 million deaths. But if you look carefully at this map, you see that this is not equally distributed around the globe. There are hotspots, namely in North America, in Europe, South America, India, and there is something very interesting. And what is interesting is China. China is really managing this pandemic and is telling us a big lesson. The lesson is that the pandemic is manageable. It is possible to control the infections. So we need to learn from them what they are doing, how they are doing it, and we need to act. And we need to act very fast because time is running out. So if you look at March, the picture is very different. You see that China was the hotspot of the pandemic, very big number of cases. Of course, the color scale is not the same, but anyway, you remember very well that China, where everything started, had huge problems. And if you look today, in October, you see that China is managing well the pandemic. And this has many consequences. How they are doing it? There are many reasons why they are succeeding. But one of the reasons is that they managed to set up a massive testing scale on a scale that in Europe and North America is not seen. So there are a number of reasons for why they are doing it and we are not doing it, and for why they are succeeding and we are not managing it so well. So this is a news from yesterday, from the Jornal de Notícias, and you can see that they detected 9 cases in the town of Qingdao, and they decided to test the entire town, 8 million people, because they detected 9 cases. So why can't we test 80,000 people in Aveiro? And we have many more than 9 cases. So what is the problem? Why can they do it and we cannot do it? So, of course, there is another lesson from this. The lesson is that the China economy is growing. So you can see that in the first quarter, there was a drop in GDP growth. It was negative. It's growing again, and IMF yesterday forecast that China will be the only large economy in the world that will grow in 2020. So managing the pandemic has big economic consequences, the way it's managed. So what are the reasons? So why can't we follow the China example? Where are the problems? Of course, there are many reasons for this. The societies are different, individual rights are different, political leadership is different. And we know some notorious cases in the Western world that will go down in history as very bad examples of mismanagement of the pandemic. So there is no point in talking about it. But we are very slow, we are reacting very slow to the challenges of the pandemic. And we have different visions about the consequences of the pandemic. In August, we almost forgot about it. It was sorted out, but we had quite a few cases, and we didn't pay attention to that. So there is also differences in regulation of the health systems, very big differences. Much more relaxed in China than in Europe or North America. And there is high-level centralization of the pandemic management and a poor understanding of what public health is and preventive medicine. And this is the reason for this is that our health system is centralized in the hospitals, not in the communities, not in preventive medicine, but in curative medicine. And that is the big problem. That's the root of everything. So, of course, there are also issues related to the high cost of the tests and heavy testing logistics that we should tackle, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. But there is also poor investment and innovation strategies in Portugal and in the rest of Europe. Low production capacity of kits and other testing materials. We rely on imports from China. And that they have a big advantage here because they produce a huge amount of kits and materials at very low cost. And so that's one of the main reasons why they can test a lot, because the tests cost a very low amount of money in China, and they are very costly in the Western world. We rely on them, on what they produce. So we need to involve communities. Communities haven't been involved yet in the management of this pandemic, universities and industry, local industry. And I'll tell you why this is so important. So looking at one of the reasons we cannot do much about the politics or the political leadership. It is what it is. But we can do something about the strategy of testing and the logistics of testing, and that's why I'm going to talk about this. So when the pandemic started, the recommendation from the World Health Organization was to use swabs, nasopharyngeal swabs. This was done in China and everywhere. The American Center for Disease Control recommended the same. And this is a huge problem. The problem is that swabs require very heavy logistics. You also have seen all these images on television and newspapers. To do a very large number of tests, to test a population with this kind of logistics, it is really difficult, and it is very, very costly. So this is one of the problems. The other problems is that we are testing using very sophisticated technology. I can tell you that we are doing tests every day, and the technology that we are using is really complex, is very, very sophisticated. Because in Europe and in North America, we want the best results, the most sensitive results. It has to be top, okay? And we are paying a heavy price for that. So it is heavy logistics at collecting samples, and it is heavy logistics in the laboratory. In our university, we are reaching around 20,000 tests. We started testing in April, and from April until now, we worked a lot, I can tell you. We've been working really hard, and we managed to do around 20,000 tests so far, around 270 tests per day. So this is very low number of tests. And the reason is the reasons I told you about: heavy logistics at sample collecting and in the laboratory. Because we want the best results, the most sensitive results. We need to ensure that we have that. Of course, we know, because we use masks every day, and now we are going to use masks everywhere, that our saliva is contaminated with viruses. That's why we use masks. So why don't we use saliva to do tests? This is a mystery to me, okay? Saliva is very simple, doesn't require any logistics. You just collect a saliva sample at home or at workplace, you put the tube in a bag, send it by post to the laboratory, no logistics at all. You don't need any nurse, you don't need any doctor. You just do it yourself. Put it in the post, it arrives in the lab, and the lab does the testing. Of course, the laboratories have to design a workflow that allows them to do a large number of tests in a short period of time at low cost. And this is one of the other problems, is that the money that we receive to do tests is not to optimize these workflows, to do large numbers of tests at low cost, but to optimize the workflow to do the most sensitive tests at high cost. And so we cannot do very large number of tests because our health authorities demand high quality testing, the highest possible. Okay? So there are issues in the way that we deal every day with, in the way we do the tests that put huge bottlenecks on the amount of work we can do per day. And this has consequences for how much we can test per day in any city, in any hospital in Portugal. So this is a very simple result or a cartoon to tell you how ridiculous this situation is at the moment. And I'm clearly a voice against this strategy of testing. We need a new strategy of testing, and we need it fast. And the reason for this is that the standard was set at the swab PCR test, which now costs 65 euros per sample, per test. In March, it cost 200 euros per test. Okay? But this is the standard for our hospitals, defined by the national health authorities. Now, if 2 weeks ago, you heard a lot about rapid tests, and our Red Cross had to go on television to put pressure on the health authorities to accept these rapid tests, and they are going to accept them now, they cost 5 euros. What is the problem? The problem is that they are not as sensitive, they are not as good as swab PCR tests, the standard test. But the question is not that. The question is, does this really matter for controlling the pandemic? And the answer is no, it doesn't really matter. So why are we doing this? The saliva tests are not accepted in Portugal, but they are almost as sensitive as the standard swab PCR test, and they cost much less. And they allow us to massify testing because the logistics are very small, are very simple. So this is the reason why these differences in this curve, how many virus particles you can detect in an individual, this is the reason why, one of the reasons why we are not testing as much as we should be testing. Now, of course, what can we do? What should we be doing? Clearly, for an hospital, we have to distinguish what is testing in an hospital setting and what is testing at the community level, in schools, in nursing homes, in factories, in private institutions, everywhere. In hospitals, we have to test at high sensitivity, high quality tests, and they have a price tag. They cost a lot of money, 65 euros per test. But we need those tests in the hospitals because we need to make sure that the people that have symptoms or that go to a surgery are not infected at all. So it makes a lot of sense to keep testing at the highest sensitivity possible in the hospital. High quality tests, highly standardized, high quality. And it's okay to pay for that, to pay more money for that. For the community where most people are asymptomatic, but they are spreaders of infection, they have no disease. There is no problem in decreasing a little bit the sensitivity of the testing because you are detecting more than 90% of the infected people anyway. You don't detect 99.9%, but you detect more than 90%. And the costs are very, very low. So we can use mathematical models to test communities and to keep a close eye on the spread of infection in communities. So why aren't we doing this? I don't have an answer for this, but we need this and we need it quick because as you heard today, 2,000 infections in a single day. 2,000 infections in a single day. And we have lessons from the past. The second wave of the Spanish flu in the last century killed more people than the first wave of the Spanish flu. So we are going into late autumn and winter in a very bad situation. And we really need to change our testing strategy, distinguish what is hospital testing, what is community testing, what is school testing, what is university testing, and what is testing in companies everywhere. We need to make that distinction. If we don't make that distinction, the hospitals will be in a very bad situation to manage the winter, because we have also the seasonal flu coming in. So we need to relieve the hospitals, and the way to do that is through community testing, but with a different strategy. So we need simpler logistics, cheaper tests, between €1 and €5 per test. We need automation. We don't need swabs at all. They are not needed at all. We need to replace them. And we need to be smart. We need to distinguish which is community testing from hospital testing, low-cost pooling strategies using mathematical models for communities on a large scale, and we need the investment in laboratories that are doing the tests. These investments, the money has to be allocated to resolve the real problems of the laboratories. And so far, this hasn't happened yet. And we need to involve the industry. This is a community issue. And our industry can produce kits, simple kits, to resolve this issue. We don't need to import anything. We can produce them and export them if the universities and the industry work together to solve this problem. And of course, we need to involve the academy, because the academy has the knowledge, has the technology, has the know-how, and can help a lot. The hospitals are very busy managing what already is a bad situation. We don't need to put even more pressure, more people, more tests in them. We need to take part of these tests out, put them in the academy, and set up large-scale testing schemes for the community. And of course, the health system has to be involved with community testing, because they have an important word to say, and they need to have access, direct access to the data continuously. So they have to be involved. They have to monitor what's going on in the community, and for that they need direct access to the data. And of course, involve the community and involve local authorities. The pandemic is a public issue problem that requires local authorities' involvement and local communities. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. Again, provocative, I would say, provocative presentation. Asking again for two of the main buzzwords that I've been using since the beginning of this conversation, which is the role of community involvement and the role of local authorities. But also the other thing is the rapid change regarding the strategy itself. So we need to address the strategy, well, the health strategy and the testing strategy in a different way. Let's see if we will have time to discuss also this topic, but time is flying and I have to give the floor to Alexandra. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank the event organization for this invitation. I feel honored to be sharing table with so amazing panel of speakers. My presentation today is about possible urban futures. As an architect, I'm interested in city making. For all city makers all around the world, we live in interesting time, full of changes and opportunities. The role of digital media in the process of city making is empowering citizens and other stakeholders in a democratic process of collaboration. It is also introduced the shift in the roles and the relationships between governments, global and local, programming scientists, designers, architects, urban planners, geographers, social scientists, management, and social organizations, and of course, citizens in all the process. In Society 5.0, proposed in the 50 Science and Technologically Basic Plan as a future society that Japan should aspire to, it follows the hunting society, the agricultural society, the industrial society, and the information society. I would like to underline that the main focus of Society 5.0 is a human-centered society that balances economic advancements with the resolution of social problems by a system that highlights, integrates cyberspaces and physical space. But it's not an easy task, as we know. Organizations, institutions, and companies should feel an obligation to think about more than how to design and execute. They should engage socially responsible process from the very start. Making societal values a priority cannot succeed from top-down regulation. It requires values as an issue that creating the opportunity for people and organizations to engage in new behaviors. In all these contexts, one important challenge is the city that should be sustainable. Cities have a unique role on the opportunity to shape humanity's change of thriving in balance with the rest of living planet this century. To achieve this, we have the goals by 2030, and we have to ensure that access for all to be adequate, safe and affordable housing and basic service and to upgrade slums. It's important to achieve inclusive and sustainable urbanization and capacity for participatory, integrated and sustainable human settlements, planning and management in all countries. It's important to create the right tools and efforts to protect and safeguard the world's culture and the natural heritage. For these goals, we have to implement a new civic intelligence, a new civic way of engagement. City must be viewed holistically. Simply installing some more new technology, no matter how elegant or powerful, cannot solve the city problems in isolation. They need to be open and participatory, but provide enough support structure for those who lack the resources to self-organize. More than anything else, they need to be inclusive. Jane Jacobs argued in the 60s that cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. There is a hope that new civic order is arising. Cities are the places where people meet to exchange ideas, trade, or simply relax and enjoy themselves. So we need to improve the design of public spaces as a consequence that quality of our lives in city. And in COVID, it's really important, these public spaces. The new neighborhoods, the public space, the open public space is really important in the times of COVID. In the cities, a variety of collaboration spaces are spreading across urban innovation ecosystems. Fab labs, open labs, living labs, tech labs. As innovation is the process of turning knowledge and ideas in value. Urban innovation can be seen as a learning process, acting and transforming practice in urban collective environments. Learning by doing process are implementing new methods, routines, products, service by bottom-up process and resilient cities. In Portugal, at ISCTE, I'm coordinating a Fab Lab, Vitruvius Fab Lab, a digital fabrication laboratory. This is an opportunity for practice-based knowledge produced continuously in on-site actions with people. This practice is embedded and distributed among the several multiple diverse actors who interact with. It does not exist independently of social action. The Fab Lab is the ideal experimental environment for reflecting on city-making practice and everyday urbanism. Looks at people, situation, and places, resulting at a high level of specificity in how public spaces are constructed. In this context, we are following two main topics, technical politics and urban regeneration. The first topic is technical politics, understood that all technology is generated with cultural, economic, and social fabrics, as well as political aspects in the conformation at its use. An approach bottom-up is in which information is co-produced and shared by citizens through overlapping networks, as in more transformative use of ECTs for new ways of doing politics. Democratization of technology, its ever-increasing influence in our life, our everyday life, and amplify the new ways in which cities can access information and make decisions in all kinds. The other point is urban regeneration process. The whole neighborhood starts with 7 processes: define, visualize, engage, represent, ideate, act, industrialize. In Portugal, I'm involved in 2 ongoing projects that start as academic studies, and I'm briefly going to share this experience. 2 international conferences and summer school technical politics in urban regeneration. Tour 19 was main topic was co-creating public space as a partnership with Cascais municipality, and Tour 20 was co-creating livable spaces as a partnership with Bahia do Tejo Barreira, a territorial management company and business parks. These were fundamental to tackle several questions in an argument that cities are a melting pot of new forms of sociability and collective action, founded on association between humans and digital technologies. The first event challenged the participants to adopt a participatory action, research methodology, to promote a plurality of knowledge. The mapping process was explored as an opportunity for special co-learning in 2 Cascais urban areas of illegal genesis, Cabeço B and Piões. To map the collective human activity and local sense, we use Google track mapping. This allowed the students to display the information with a clear narrative, which includes photographies, videos, testimonies from local dwellers, and structuring the information under different themes, reframing the problematics and actions that need to be taken in all the neighborhoods. Such digital trace can reflect individual as well collective urban aspects and various levels of spatial and temporal aspects. All the collected data was presented in groups, meeting in the Cascais laboratory, as we see in this image. We use 3D physical models that can be used as an overview of all the collected information to match and see all the layers necessary to develop of new design proposals. This is the general view of the studio work. The participants used the Vitruvius Fab Lab as a digital fabrication platform to prototype artifacts to be tested in situ and deliver the solutions to the inhabitants. This image shows the toolkits designed to involve the neighborhood inhabitants in the next steps of participatory design process. This is an image of one of the actions in situ involving the people in the creation of neighborhood square. Makes the population aware that it needs a new space to promote new activities in these illegal neighborhoods. In Tour 20, Technical Politics in Urban Generation in Barreiro was highlighted the importance of creating in co-creation in construction of livable, sustainable cities, presenting an opportunity to share the work of architectural practice and researches on the participatory experience and methodologies. In this case, we use a serious game as a method to get conscious of the Barreiro challenge and opportunities. We use the physical device to collect information and on local associations, and based on 3 questions: what city we have, what city we want, how can we activate the city? In 2 weeks, we listened to 55 people, and this information was essential for all the proposals. We have other points of engaging the people, and we use other toolkits to promote the participation in the architectural design. This is one of the proposals located in front of local market in Barreiro, and a mobile platform to make the local associations to meet and share resources. Were invited sport associations, cultural associations, urban agricultural associations, and others. The results were explained to the locals in an exhibition, and this is the team involved in all the process. In sum, urban transformation is widely recognized as a complex phenomenon, rich in uncertainty. It is the unpredictable consequence of the complex interplay involving urban forces, both top-down and bottom-up. Urban resources, spatial, social, cultural, political, and infrastructural, and transformation opportunities, endogenous and exogenous. The discipline of design, traditionally bound to the development of tangible artifacts, has expanded its focus to include intangible interactions, process, people, and emotions. Participatory methods have been developed and experimented in various contexts, giving birth to a wide set of tools for involvement of actors, the construction of networks, the definition of underpin business models, and prototyping and testing new emergent processes and responses to promote resilient cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Again, engaging presentation on the topic of human-centered cities, and that's actually, I think, one of the main reasons we are here today discussing these issues regarding resilience and smart cities, and a way of ending these 4 presentations, or a good way to end these 4 presentations, precisely to say that we can keep speaking about, keep talking about resilience, smart cities, and all the other buzzwords around the future of cities, but remember that the main and final goal is to have human-centered cities. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of COVID is the fact that it's absolutely and technically today impossible to ask the audience to, because we are not able to have a mic going around, to ask questions, and the time flies. So as agreed with the organizers, I will try to sum up your questions. I'm trying to sense the questions. And if the technical aspects work, I will try to ask one first question to Lucia, if she's still there, and then one question for each of our guests here, and then we'll have to end. Lucia, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Oh, great, it's working. That's good, that's good. One of the, I don't know if you understood what I said just after your presentation, when you focused on the long-term strategies of Milano regarding technology, communities, and sustainability, and how we can cope with this long-term strategies and at the same time having to address very pressing issues and very wicked problems like COVID-19. And that's, I would say, it's the context of the first 2 presentations. But my question for you would be related to a hidden word in this discussion, which is the word collaboration. I think most of these strategies you addressed, or these final goals or strategic goals of Milan, relied a lot on the collaboration between institutions, between the city and the citizens. You also gave some examples of citizens' involvement, but my very concrete question, and I would ask you also to be very brief as possible, is did this idea of the relevance of collaboration change during the lockdown or during these last 6 months? Did it have an impact on the way the city, and especially the work you do in the city, saw the relationship between city authorities and other institutions and citizens? Was there an impact there also?
Thanks for asking. This is a very smart question, actually. Your starting point was from the possibility to conciliate a long-term vision together with the emergency actions. So yes, I believe that collaboration is crucial and is working here. There are some issues that in some way answer to this point, in the sense that it's true, it is an emergency phase and hopefully it's transitory, not permanent. But at the same time, we believe that the world won't be the same anymore. We are not going back, in the sense that, I will take an example, smart working. People discovered smart working. It was not that common, especially in some business sector. So, of course, it was a necessity, but at the same time, it was appreciated from some professionals that it's weird, I know, but immediately realized that a lot of their job was they were able to do it from home, and so in this way conciliate some personal issues and and so on and so forth. So what is happening, for example, within the municipality of Milan? We reduced our smart working hours, so we are not anymore 100% in smart working, but we created a sort of, and this is in terms of also collaboration, solidarity bank. So who is more in the need to do smart working, they can use the days left by the professionals who, for example, not have personal issues, health issues, so they can donate. So there will be this kind of balance. And also, this was an example about smart working, but I think also about the strategy called the city in 15 minutes. So this was there was a lot of talks among the mayor of Paris, the mayor of Milan, in order to relaunch local services. And I think that, again, in this sense, we are not going back. And I mean that, in big city centers, we are facing for a while social tensions, of course, among the outskirts, the city centers. I also think about Paris, the banlieue, but in our smaller scale, it's like this in Milan as well. So the idea to relaunch, starting from the pandemic crisis, to relaunch local businesses is something that create a sense of proximity, of solidarity, but also helps us to reduce social distances and produce economic effects. So I think that in some way, yes, we are not going back totally. There are some things that will have their effect, and they need to be pursued with a long-term vision, because they can't just be, we can just do only pop-up initiatives in this sense, because people tried some difficulties, some issues, and raised some rights correctly. So in this sense, also the idea of the impact of collaboration, I think that it will leave its traces and won't be erasable just right after this pandemic overall.
And thank you very much for being with us and having the opportunity to at least discuss one question after your very interesting presentation. Thank you very much, Lucia. We'll certainly meet again, and we'll meet in Aveiro, I hope. Manuel, I have a provocative question based on your provocative presentation. I'm really sorry, but I have to ask it. Because you started with a brief overview and brief picture of the Chinese success story, at least for now. And one of the known reasons, it's a very centralized bureaucratic regime that allows for a very strong way of implementing policies. It's a very kind way of explaining the Chinese regime. But you ended saying, and it was exactly the last sentence of your slide, speaking about the relevance of city engagement, of local authorities, of citizens, in our case. How can we balance these two approaches? Because on one side we know it, top-down, very strong approach succeeded, but on the other hand we need communities, especially if we are speaking of what the strategy you advocate for, which is a massive testing and cheaper testing, is to be in place. What's the role of the cities there? That's my very objective question.
Yes, that's a good question. And of course, the societies are different, the civil rights are different, and a top-down approach, like the Chinese approach, for population scale testing strategy may not work. I think there will be reaction against anything like that. So the only way, in my opinion, to resolve this problem is really to engage the communities. Tell them why this is important and explain very well that if we can control this pandemic, and the pandemic is, it's possible to control it if they are engaged, if they participate, I think there is a benefit for everyone. Okay. And I think that we have to use these two approaches because the societies are different. Our democracy is different. It's not the same.
Thank you. I would like to underline this, the idea that we have different understandings of what citizenship is. And we have citizens with rights and different perspectives of their own rights regarding policy decision and city future. Now moving precisely based on what I said to Alexandra, our last question, because we have to finish, is picking up on what I just said regarding citizenship. There's also something that strikes me when I hear this kind of presentations as the one you just did, to which I'm very close to, of course. But it's how to balance, how to cope with two different rhythms, two different paces. The rhythm of the problems that need fast policy, even top-down policies, quick answers, and the rhythm of citizen engagement, which is usually slower. It takes time, it needs reflection, it needs opinion, it needs people to be really engaged. How can we cope with this? I know it's not an easy one, but...
It's not an easy question and easy answer, but I think involving the people of the community, they know the answer. And if you give them the empowerment and if you give them the tools to do that, and we have lots of tools, we have several students that use these social media to engage with the dwellers of the city. In Barreiro, one of my students used the social media as a way of promoting collaborative partnership or to solve some of the problems in the local scale. And I think was really interesting because everyone adopted that tool and solved some of the problems with the solidarity in the community. If we engage really with the community, they know the answers. And I think this is a powerful thing that we as city makers have to know, we have to use as a power tool to solve some of the problems. When we talk about COVID, and one of the important things now is the public space, how we can go to the public space. All of us know now our neighborhoods, know what happens in our neighborhoods, and I think that is a way of, if we know our neighbor, we know how to solve some of the problems of what we have. And we have the opportunity to know in the media some examples how, as a citizen, we solve some of the problems of our building and how we use some tools to solve some problems. And I think that is what I would like to underline is the community knows the answers. And
shared knowledge amongst citizens.
And I think it's important because the top-down solutions most of the times don't know exactly what the community wants.
Of course. I have two words to add. The first one is that this was exactly the perfect place to have this, unfortunately, very small in time conversation. The place is the Tech Week. We were, during this 1.5 hours, speaking about experimentation, cities, citizens, how to tackle with the pressing issues of COVID, the role of technology, all of this in the place where, or in the moment when a city is showcasing its own approach to sustainability, technology, innovation. And the only thing I should say, unfortunately, is it's the fact that we didn't have time and the opportunity to engage with all the people online. I was checking. The ones here, thank you very much for being here. And that's the problem with COVID. We didn't have time to discuss everything. So we'll probably keep this discussion going on for the future. I'm certain we will do it. And thank you for that. The second word is that I will give the floor to the mayor of Aveiro to close the session because he arrived half an hour ago. And the floor is yours, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. And thank you to you all. Thank you.
Boa tarde a todos. Muito gosto. Muito obrigado à Alexandra, ao Manuel e ao Filipe esta peça, e à Lucia, embora esta coisa virtual, né? Ao vivo, mas não materialmente. E eu queria só deixar 2 ou 3 notas de agradecer esta reflexão que fomos tendo aqui, eu só pude acompanhar aqui os últimos 20 minutos. Mas dávamos conta de 2 ou 3 coisas. Não, sei que o João Machado já aqui partilhou algumas das experiências que tivemos neste combate, mas eu gostava de referenciar 2 ou 3. Uma porque achámos até há pouco tempo que o pior do combate já tinha acontecido, e outra porque é cada vez mais evidente que o pior do combate está para acontecer. E, portanto, julgo que há aqui um quadro que é muito importante e queria só, com 2 ou 3 exemplos muito simples, dar-vos conta o que é que fizemos e o que é que não estamos a fazer hoje e que eu acho que devemos fazer. Eu acho que o Covid nos trouxe oportunidades muito interessantes. Por exemplo, exemplificando, para ser mais fácil, a Câmara Municipal de Aveiro tem 600 inquilinos de renda social e iam 600 pessoas por mês aos serviços de atendimento pagar a sua renda. O Covid obrigou-nos a ativar o pagamento por multibanco, que era uma coisa, obviamente, que já devíamos ter feito há muito tempo, mas que nunca tínhamos feito. E agora temos apenas 30 pessoas, aquelas que não têm ou não querem ter cartão para irem pagar um multibanco. E hoje temos 30 pessoas e toda a gente paga a sua renda, não precisa de ir à Câmara. Ou os nossos pais, os encarregados de educação, que no sistema anterior que tínhamos, iam aos serviços da Câmara e eram quase 3.000 que iam, em regra, uma vez por trimestre, fazer carregamento de cartão para que depois, com o cartão carregado, pudessem na escola comprar várias coisas, em especial as refeições escolares. Com a plataforma que pusemos a funcionar no passado mês de setembro, hoje vão 0 pais aos serviços da Câmara carregar cartões, porque fazem num processo muito simples, numa plataforma eletrónica que se acede no seu computador portátil ou no seu telemóvel. Isso permitiu-nos que aqueles que lá têm que ir, nós temos mais tempo para eles, podemos fazer um atendimento muito mais qualificado e, obviamente, os tempos de espera, essas coisas, todos os parâmetros melhoraram muito. Mas há alguns que nós não quisemos que deixassem de ir. Eu recusei, mandei para trás, as primeiras 3 ou 4 avaliações sociais para apoiar pessoas com dificuldades económicas surgidas por causa da pandemia, ou por pessoas que perderam o emprego, ou foram para layoff, e o terço do rendimento que perderam era-lhes capital e, portanto, precisavam de uma ajuda. E surgiram os primeiros 3 ou 4 relatórios de avaliação social feito por teletrabalho. E eu recusei e mandei para trás, porque não é possível, na minha leitura, ter uma interação com um ser humano que tem uma dificuldade económica. Precisamos de o conhecer notas sumárias da sua vida, conhecer a casa onde habita, e não é possível fazer isto em teletrabalho. E, portanto, a equipa, obviamente, tomou um conjunto de medidas básicas, normais, de proteção individual, os técnicos da Câmara e as pessoas com quem tínhamos que conversar, ou no atendimento de todos os dias na Câmara, não é preciso marcar, ou na ida àqueles que, por necessidade, a vários níveis, precisavam que se fôssemos nós a ir à sua casa, e pronto, e fazemos isso e temos trabalho dessa natureza todos os dias e as pessoas esperam muito pouco. Não é como na segurança social, que estão 2 semanas, marca-se uma audiência, um atendimento, demora 2 semanas e no dia do atendimento tem que se ir para lá, para a filinha às 7 da manhã, porque senão só se é atendido ao meio-dia. Há aqui uma nota que é muito importante. Isto é uma guerra. E obviamente que nós temos cada vez menos pessoas que tiveram formação militar. Mas pelo menos sabemos as regras básicas. Nós fazemos formação militar para não ir à guerra. A ideia de haver estruturas militares é para não termos guerra. Essa é a ideia base. Mas, e felizes os militares que fazem uma carreira sem nunca ter guerra. Obviamente. É o objetivo de todos. Mas a existência daquela capacidade é importante para não haver guerra. No entanto, quando há guerra, é preciso ir à guerra. Aqui é parecido. Nós tivemos uma universidade, e temos, felizmente, que se capacitou, enfim, vou arredondar a conta, professor Manuel, em 2 meses, para instalar um laboratório e fazer testes de Covid. Foi a segunda em Portugal, se a memória não me atrás só. A seguir ao Algarve foi a primeira. E foi uma ajuda preciosíssima para todo o sistema, para todos nós, rede de cuidados primários, rede de cuidados secundários hospitalares, nós, câmaras que estavam a fazer a ponta às IPSS, aos lares, foi um instrumento importantíssimo. Hoje o país dá-se ao luxo de já não usar esta competência, porque os profissionais que faziam o trabalho de recolha não estão disponíveis, e então tudo é comprado ao setor privado e pago luxuosamente. Para ter uma noção, o setor privado leva, em termos de custos, de um teste similar ao teste de Zaragatoa que fazíamos e fazemos, embora para outro tipo de universos. Na nossa universidade, o setor privado leva assim um valor médio, o triplo daquilo que levava a nossa universidade. Mas o Estado entende que está-se bem. Portanto, como não há profissionais para fazer a recolha, então pronto, faz-se uma prescrição e vai-se a um laboratório privado que estão sempre disponíveis e fazem testes com uma rapidez enorme. E isto não faz sentido. Nós estamos, agora sim, já está claro para todos, que estamos numa segunda vaga maior em dimensão que a primeira, claramente maior, vai aumentar, e tem uma coisa boa e uma coisa má. A primeira coisa boa é que temos os nossos cidadãos mais vulneráveis, mais protegidos. Até hoje, por exemplo, no nosso município, temos 0 casos em lares e fora de lares, já vamos com um ritmo acelerado. Nós, para vocês terem uma noção, nós fizemos 8 casos novos por dia em abril, fizemos 2 casos novos por dia em média em maio, depois andámos entre o 1,7 e o 0,4 entre junho e agosto, voltámos aos 2 casos em setembro e nos primeiros 8 dias de outubro fizemos 4 casos e meio. Não temos idosos. Montámos um mecanismo, aprendemos com a primeira vaga, proteger os mais vulneráveis. E estamos a fazê-lo bem, globalmente bem. E, obviamente, os casos que hoje temos são outras faixas etárias. Obviamente, a malta dos 20, dos 30, dos 40, dos 50. Mais, vão ser mais, não há dúvidas. Ainda não estamos, gostávamos muito de não estar, nos 8 casos novos de média que tivemos em abril, mas é praticamente inevitável. A questão hoje é como é que nós gerimos isto sem confinar. Como é que nós conseguimos que quem é preciso para este combate não meta atestado médico e fuja do combate? Como é que nós conseguimos convencer-nos que se nós cumprirmos as regras de proteção individual, de distanciamento social, etc., nós podemos e devemos ter uma vida o mais próxima possível do normal? Que a presença tem uma importância enorme na atividade económica e nós temos um problema grave da atividade económica. É bom relembrar esse número violentíssimo. A queda do PIB no segundo trimestre deste ano foi de 16,8% em relação ao PIB do segundo trimestre de 2019 e, portanto, este é um desafio brutal. E, portanto, volta a lógica da guerra, em que nós estamos numa fase de brutal crescimento. Os números de hoje, em relação aos dos últimos dias, são brutais e todos os indicadores nos dizem que eles vão continuar a crescer, mas nós temos que estar presentes neste combate. Nós temos que não aceitar um falso atestado médico, não aceitar que o medo lidere esse processo. E esta é a grande questão. É muito importante que nós consigamos fazer isto e, obviamente, que o setor público seja quem dá o exemplo, por mais, obviamente, que temos que nos adaptar a estas circunstâncias para que o combate tenha sucesso, para que os mais vulneráveis tenham apoio e para que saibamos que, quando somos militares, de vez em quando temos que ir à guerra e quando somos servidores do Estado, seja numa Câmara, na Segurança Social, num hospital ou numa unidade de cuidados primários de saúde, temos que lá estar sempre a trabalhar, mas em situações de crise temos que estar lá mais, independentemente de podermos ser contagiados e temos que cumprir as regras para gerirmos a nossa doença, o risco de contaminarmos outros e, obviamente, voltarmos à vida normal. E, portanto, esta é a grande questão, que não é uma questão de sociedade, é uma questão de falarmos verdade e termos o ato solidário da presença na linha da frente do combate, sob pena das coisas serem muito complexas, como já são. E só há notícias de alguns hospitais que já estão a atingir o limite, mas há outros vários que ainda não são notícia e que já estão nesse limite. Mas o limite principal, primeiro, não é exatamente o limite das condições físicas, que também é o limite dos recursos humanos disponíveis para o combate. Sabendo que, obviamente, aquilo que hoje o Governo apresentou, do plano de recuperação e resiliência, nós temos que levar muito a sério a resiliência e a ideia da resiliência, tenho dito e gosto muito de repetir, e para terminar, A ideia da resiliência é, de uma vez por todas, e acho que a Comissão Europeia foi muito feliz quando escolheu esta palavra para o nome, para colocar no nome do Mecanismo Europeu de Recuperação e Resiliência, nós temos que pôr na nossa cabeça, de uma vez por todas, que queremos, obviamente, que a sociedade, que a economia ande sempre para a frente e que tudo seja positivo e que a lógica seja mais para mais, mais para mais. Mas temos que ter a noção tranquila de que a vida não é feita sempre assim, que de vez em quando há uma crise financeira, há uma pandemia, há um problema qualquer na nossa vida individual que nos põe à prova, que suscita do sistema uma resposta anormal, que pede, que exige à administração pública, que exige às empresas uma resposta diferenciada. Aquilo que é a poupança dos indivíduos, aquilo que é a capitalização nas empresas, aquilo que é a capacidade de reserva para a crise que um hospital tem que ter, que uma Câmara Municipal tem que ter, para nós podermos responder. É a tal capacitação para sermos mais resilientes, para respondermos à adversidade, seja ela mais previsível ou absolutamente surpreendente, como esta que nós estamos a viver. E, portanto, era esta nota de compromisso e de reflexão que eu gostava de partilhar neste encerramento desta reflexão que aqui tivemos nestas 2 horas, com a garantia absoluta de que nós aqui estaremos. E estaremos a mobilizar todos para estarmos neste combate. O medo nunca ganhou luta nenhuma. Nunca. A única hipótese que a ferramenta medo nos pode dar é perdermos. É como no futebol, quem joga a defesa, ganhar nunca ganha. E com todo o sentido de responsabilidade, este é o momento de virmos para a linha de combate e de exigirmos àqueles que têm que estar na linha da frente do combate para estarem. Até porque, como dizia há dias a ministra Alexandra Leitão com grande graça, o Covid tem as costas largas e hoje dá-se o Covid de explicação para uma série de coisas e o coitado do Covid não tem nada a ver com uma série de patologias do funcionamento. No caso, estávamos a discutir a administração pública. E, obviamente, é bom que não façamos isso e que o nosso sistema de saúde continue a responder, como não tem respondido bem, como sabemos, a tantas outras patologias, que não adie operações, que não adie diagnóstico. Um cancro detectado em março pode ser combatido com sucesso e em setembro está resolvido. Um cancro que não foi detectado em março, se vai fazer exames em setembro, pode ter a notícia da irreversibilidade. Portanto, este é um momento capital para testar a nossa resiliência, sabendo que, por mais dinheiro que nos ponham em cima da nossa mesa, nós vamos ter 13 mil milhões, é muito dinheiro, há uma parte da luta, ou dos instrumentos para a luta, que exigem a autodeterminação individual e a fortaleza comunitária, para nós irmos à luta e ganharmos, ou pelo menos irmos ganhando neste processo tão difícil. Seguramente na nossa vida não temos muitos problemas que têm na interrogação a lógica base. E o Covid tem na interrogação a sua lógica base e nós temos que aprender a viver com isto e saber que temos que estar na linha da frente. E estar na linha da frente é correr riscos. Quem não luta na linha da frente não corre riscos. E é esta luta. Nós temos que correr riscos. Basicamente, ou enfim, em esmagadora maioria, não são de vida. O que está aqui em causa é mesmo um ato solidário para com aqueles que são mais frágeis na sua estrutura de saúde, que muitas vezes está agregado, obviamente, à condição social e à condição económica. Portanto, muito obrigado pelas reflexões e fica aqui o nosso compromisso de seguirmos todos juntos neste trabalho da vida que assumimos com tanto gosto e tanta alegria e pronto, e nesta empreitada em que nos meteram. Não sei se o Manuel defendeu a tese do chinês, a tese do Trump foi o chinês que inventou isto. Enfim, eventualmente eu tenho tendência a achar que sim, mas não interessa. O que interessa agora, não é? Interessa a nós procurarmos combater e sair disto o mais rapidamente possível. Obrigado a todos. Tudo bom, obrigado.
Thank you all for your presence in this session of Aveiro Tech Week.